my channel. My name's Rosica and this is the Midnight Reader. Today I thought I'd do something a little different because I have a bunch of videos coming up that are gonna take a little longer to edit, where I'm doing like year in review stuff. Basically, I wanted to make a short video recommending books on a particular theme. I've had this one kicking around for a while. So I'm a runner in my real life. I run a variety of distances. I've been a runner since I was early teenage years. I'm an off and on again runner, so I typically run for like 6 months at a time and do a variety of races, and then I take 6 months off and I don't run at all. I used to be pretty competitive when I was younger, but now I pretty much just run for fun and health and fitness and to spend time with my husband. So I thought I would recommend 5 books about running, and I have decided to recommend them towards a certain category of runner because there are many different types of runners, and just because you like running or are a runner doesn't mean you'll enjoy these books. And when I was making this list, I was realizing that I didn't actually have that many books about running that I would recommend. At the end, I'm going to add on my own running themed TBR. So for the first book, I am recommending this to the me runner, which is the average, the middle, the pack runner. You won't see us because we're surrounded by so many other people because we're so forking average. So for that runner, I'm going to recommend Run to the Finish, The Everyday Runner's Guide to Avoiding Injury, Ignoring the Clock, and Loving the Run by Amanda Brooks. The blurb for this on the back says, Run to the Finish is not your typical running book. While it is filled with useful strategic training advice throughout, at its core, it's about embracing your place in the middle of the pack with humor and learning to love the run you've got without comparing yourself to other runners. Brooks is the down-to-earth, inspiring guide for everyone who wants to be happier with their run. So I agree with pretty much a lot of that. Amanda Brooks is a popular blogger and she's a running coach as well. I picked this book up just because it looked interesting. I knew nothing about her actually at the time. I read this on audiobook. This was my favorite running read of 2021. I laughed out loud multiple times. Lots of great tips for like choosing gear and exercises and injury prevention, as well as lots of funny anecdotes about the weird and wonderful world of running. This is very much a love letter to the middle of the pack runner, for those of us who are just trying to get a little faster, a little fitter, and avoid injury. I would recommend this book to anyone who's just starting running or who's trying to nurture a love of running without that little seed of love and joy getting crushed by comparison to others. For my second recommendation, I will be recommending to the runner who is seeking inspiration and maybe a little semi-nudity. The semi-nudity part is a joke because it's about barefoot running. So this is Born to Run, A Hidden Tribe, Superathletes, and the Greatest Race the World Has Never Seen by Christopher McDougall. So this is a nonfiction book that sometimes reads a little bit like fiction. The blurb on the back says, an epic adventure that began with one simple question: why does my foot hurt? Isolated by Mexico's deadly copper canyons, the blissful Tarahumara Indians have honed the ability to run hundreds of miles without rest or injury. In a riveting narrative, award-winning journalist and often injured runner Christopher McDougall sets out to discover their secrets. In the process, he takes his readers from science labs at Harvard to the sun-baked valleys and freezing peaks across North America to a climactic race in the Copper Canyons that pits America's best ultra-runners against the tribe. McDougall's incredible story will not only engage your mind but inspire your body when you realize that you, indeed all of us, were born to run. So I genuinely enjoyed this book, but I wouldn't recommend it for beginning runners. This book has a very definite point of view, and there's a reason for that, right? Like, this is the book that started the barefoot running craze, and that's because it's very persuasive about 2 facts. 1, his argument is that humans were born to run, and 2, you were meant to do it barefoot. So this is a book that's going to make you want to go running and take your shoes off. If that's what it's trying to achieve, it does that very well. However, at the end of the day, it's still a book about ultra running, which is very much still a niche part of the running community. If you don't know, ultras are any distance that is greater than a traditional marathon distance of 26.2 miles. I have never run that. I will never run that. I have run one marathon, and I gotta tell you, at the end of it, I did not want to go further. I know ultra runners. They're really cool people. It's not for me, but power to you if you're into that. I would say this is a very interesting, persuasive, often inspirational book. I would recommend it to runners who are experiencing a lull in their running and maybe seeking a little inspiration. Next, I've got a book for the history buff runner. So this is The Perfect Mile by Neal Bascomb. If you know just one trivia fact about running, it may be that Roger Bannister was the first man to break the 4-minute mile. What you might not know is that he was one of 3 men on 3 different continents, all trying to break the 4-minute mile barrier at the same time. So from the blurb on the back, there was a time when running the mile in 4 minutes was believed to be beyond the limits of human foot speed. And in all of sport, it was the elusive holy grail. 3 world-class runners each set out to break this barrier. Roger Bannister was a young English medical student who epitomized the ideal of the amateur, still driven not just by winning, but by the nobility of their pursuit. John Landy was the privileged son of a genteel Australian family who as a boy preferred butterfly collecting to running, but who trained relentlessly in an almost spiritual attempt to shape his body to this singular task. Then there was Wes Santee, the swaggering American, a Kansas farm boy and natural athlete who believed he was just plain better than everybody else. So I read this book in high school and I freaking loved it. I'm a big history buff and I thought this was so interesting. The 4-minute mile was the unbreakable human time barrier. Like people thought you would just like explode or something if you could possibly go under 4 minutes. There was no such thing as professional running at the time. These people had jobs. They ran on dirt or cinder tracks. They would carry a little freaking trowel to the start line to dig out their starting blocks in the track. It's a crazy, wild historical ride. If you're fascinated at all by the history of running and old time barriers, this is the one for you. And lastly, for my 4th and 5th book, it's all recommended to one person. It seems like it's a cult runner. So this last one I was really torn on because I read both of these books in high school. One genuinely is a cult running novel that I genuinely disliked. And the other is about a cult running figure in the United States. So in the end, I compromised, and I'm going to talk about both, which is 2 runners with cult followings, one who is fictional and one who is nonfiction. So first up is Once a Runner by John L. Parker Jr. This is a fiction book. It was self-published in 1978. It was originally sold at races out of the back of people's trucks, and people would pass around tattered copies to other people at races. Reading it became kind of like a rite of passage, and the scarcity of the book really contributed to it being like a cult sacred text of running. It has since been republished, so it's actually not difficult to get a hold of anymore, but it still has kind of a cult status in the world of running books. Once a Runner is the story of Quentin Cassidy, a collegiate runner at fictional Southeastern University, whose lifelong dream is to run a 4-minute mile. See, told you it was a big deal. He is less than a second away when the political and cultural turmoil of the Vietnam War era intrudes. After he becomes involved in an athlete's protest, Cassidy is suspended from his track team. Cassidy gives up his scholarship, his girlfriend, and possibly his future to withdraw to a monastic retreat in the countryside and begin training for the race of his life, a head-to-head match with the greatest miler in history. So here's the thing. I did not like this in high school. I thought it was a little bit pretentious. I didn't relate to the character at all. It had kind of some like Man Payne, Catcher in the Rye vibes. So I didn't relate to this book, which is why I didn't like it. But that doesn't mean that it's not a good book. And it doesn't mean that it's not a cult running classic. Like every teenage boy on my running team had this book jammed down the front of their short shorts, okay? It was a big deal. I think it would be remiss of me to not put it in here because it is the original cult running novel. At its core, it's about a young man who gives up everything else in his life to pursue one singular task of being the best runner possible. And if you want to read the story about a person who did that in real life, I would recommend The Story of America's Greatest Running Legend by Tom Jordan. So this is the nonfiction recommendation. The Story of America's Greatest Running Legend. For 5 years, no American runner could beat him at any distance over a mile. That's friggin' insane. But at the age of 24, with his best year still ahead, long-distance runner Steve Prefontaine finally lost. Driving alone at night after a party, Prefontaine crashed his sports car, putting a tragic and shocking end to the life and career of one of the most influential, accomplished runners of our time. He was a goddamn legend, Okay, so I grew up hearing stories about him because my dad was a runner in the 1970s in Oregon, which is where Steve Prefontaine is from. He's from Coos Bay, Oregon. He's still a cult figure all across American running. Bill Bowerman was his coach, who you might know him from his other tiny endeavors, like being the founder of Nike. Pre was also kind of an asshole sometimes. He was very rock and roll, like flying hair, flying mustache. He had that kind of cult of personality following. This is very simply his biography. It's his story. But yeah, if you want to read about sort of a fictionalized version, I would read about Quentin Cassidy. And if you want to hear about the man who really did it, read about Steve Prefontaine. Hi from Editing Rosca. I wanted to interject quickly because while I love the story of Pre, the book I recommended is not actually a book that's written very well. So if you want a book that's maybe more enjoyable to read, that's about Prefontaine and that time period. The book I was actually thinking of was Bowerman and the Men of Oregon, the story of Oregon's legendary coach and Nike co-founder. And that book is by Kenny Moore. And if my memory does not fail me, that's much, much better written, although it's more about Bowerman than Prefontaine. Next up is my running TBR. I'm a mood reader, so I pick them up when I feel like it. I'm hoping to maybe read one soon because I usually start running again after the new year. So I have 4 books on my TBR. The first one is what I'm calling my fun run read, A Beautiful Work in Progress by Mirna, Valerio. This is her memoir of being a runner who maybe doesn't fit the visual expectations of what we have for what a runner looks like. So her thing is all about body positivity and her journey as being a badass runner who might surprise the shit out of you. And it's supposedly a memoir that's like very funny with like sharp humor and stuff like that. So I'm hoping to read it soon because it sounds really fun. For what I'm going to call track day is Bravey, Chasing Dreams, Befriending Pain, and Other Big Ideas by Alexi Pappas. She's a dual citizen US and Greek runner. I believe she represented Greece in the Athens Olympics. She's also an award-winning writer, filmmaker, and I believe actress. But this is her memoir, her journey as a runner, as well as losing her mother really early in her life to suicide, and how she used that to fuel her run for greatness. Next, I have a running club read. Running clubs are places where you can run with friends or strangers who are all kind of interested in the same thing. So for this read, I picked Running with Sherman, how a rescue donkey inspired a ragtag gang of runners to enter the craziest race in America, by Christopher McDougall. He is the author of Born to Run. This is his story of how he apparently adopted a rescue donkey, and then during its process of rehab, they started running together. This is the story of a man running with a donkey and their friendship, and that sounds fine with me. Finally, like most weeks in training plans, we're gonna end on the long run. For this category, I picked The Rise of the Ultra Runners, A Journey to the Edge of Human Endurance by Adharanand Finn. Apparently that means eternal bliss in Sanskrit. His parents were hippies. Fun fact. So the blurb on this is, once the reserve of only the most hardcore enthusiasts, ultra running is now a thriving global industry with hundreds of thousands of competitors each year. But it is the rise of this most brutal and challenging sport with races that extend into hundreds of miles, often in extreme environments, an antidote to modern life or a symptom of a modern illness. I'd like to learn more about ultras. I am so impressed by the people who can do them and can push their bodies to that level of physicality. But yeah, these are my recommendations for running reads. I have no running accolades to support myself other than I'm a runner and a reader. Hopefully there's 1 or 2 in there that appeal to you. If you have other running recommendations, please let me know. My TBR is not set in stone. It also highly depends on what's available at the library. But anyway, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will be having some videos upcoming with yearly wrap-ups soon. Thanks, and happy reading.